The hallway smelled like lemon cleaner and old news. Fluorescent lights hummed above me, too bright for the hour, too bright for the way my hands shook. Beige walls, plastic flowers, a television in the lounge murmuring a game show where everyone shouted the right answers into a void. Just for a few days, my son said. He'd said it like a lullaby, like I was a child who needed soothing and not the woman who had once worked double shifts so he could eat the brand of cereal with the cartoons on the box. Rest up, Jason told me, squeezing my shoulder as the automatic doors sighed open. They'll help you get settled. His wife, Danielle, smiled with her mouth and not with her eyes. Lip gloss cold on my cheek. We're only doing what's best, Mom, she said. The word mom pinched thin, like she borrowed it for the occasion. I didn't bring a bag. I didn't even wear my good shoes. Who packs a suitcase for soup? The receptionist slid a clipboard toward me. Initial here, signature there. Her nails were careful, perfect. My name looked startled on their forms. Margaret Hale, age 67. Status, observation. Just a few days, Jason repeated. He kissed the top of my head like a benediction, like a goodbye. By the time I looked up, his back was already walking away. The doors breathed shut behind him. They put me in a room with a bed I didn't choose, and a dresser that had never held anything of mine. No photos, no calendar with dentist appointments penciled in, no refrigerator door with grandkids drawings stuck under magnets. Only a window that looked out onto a rectangle of lawn, so green it felt like it had been ironed. Call if you need anything, the nurse said. She was young, kind-eyed, hair tucked into a bun that refused to be tamed. Her name tag said Tara. Dinner at 5. Pills at 6. Can I use a phone? I asked, just to tell my son, I'm here. You'll have to wait until visiting hours, she said, then winced at her own words. I'll see what I can do. She didn't bring a phone. At 5, they served meatloaf that tasted like it had been taught to forget it was once meat. At 6, Tara returned with a small paper cup. Blood pressure, she said, and the multivitamin. I turned the pills with my fingertip. He told you I'm confused, I said. She hesitated. There are notes in your chart. What did he say? That you fainted, that you've been forgetting things, that you left the stove on. I fainted once, I said, because I was foolish enough to make bread on an empty stomach. I met her eyes, and if the stove was left on, the cat has learned a new trick. Her mouth twitched, then she lowered her voice. I'll bring the charge nurse in the morning. We'll sort it out. When she left, the room felt too quiet, like the silence was listening to me. I folded my hands in my lap like I was in church and stared at the floor until my heartbeat steadied. On the left wall, a clock with bold black numbers ticked with cheerful indifference. At 7:12, somebody laughed down the hall. At 7:13, someone cried. I thought of my kitchen. Yellow curtains, the dented kettle, the window that let morning in like a friend. I thought of the patch of garden I'd kept for 30 years, tomatoes, stubborn roses, the rosemary bush that survived every winter like it had something to prove. I thought of the phone on the counter, probably lighting up with a message thread that said we did the right thing. I slept badly and woke early, the sky outside my window a thin gray shrug. At 8, I asked to see the administrator. At 9, a woman in a navy blazer arrived, her smile friendly in the way of people who have practiced friendliness, so it doesn't take time. Mrs. Hale, she said, sitting in the chair by the bed. I'm Miss Porter. I heard you had concerns. There's been a mistake, I said. My son meant well, but I don't need to be here. I can take care of myself. I have a house to run. She folded her hands. Your son brought documentation. Yesterday. She flipped a folder open so I could see the photocopies. My name. His signature. Boxes checked. Medical consent. Residential admission. Observation status. Long-term recommended. A line of text underlined in careful ink. Reports of confusion and unsafe behaviors. Unsafe, I repeated slowly, as if tasting the word would change it. Did he say what those were? Leaving the stove on, she read. Wandering. Falling. She paused. Also losing track of money. I laughed once, and it wasn't a nice sound. I balanced a restaurant's books in my head for 2 years, while the owner learned to trust a spreadsheet. I have never lost track of a dollar that needed tracking. Ms. Porter's gaze softened. Sometimes families get ahead of themselves. We'll need a physician's evaluation to change your status, but it can be done. Good, I said. I'll call my doctor. She closed the folder gently. We'll contact him. For now, try to rest. Rest, the word everyone used when they meant give up. After she left, Tara slipped in with contraband. An old landline phone on a rolling cart, its cord curled like a sleeping cat's tail. You didn't get this from me, she whispered. I dialed Jason from muscle memory. He didn't pick up. I tried again. Voicemail. On the third call, Danielle answered. Hi, Margaret. Her voice was bright as wrapping paper. Everything okay? You changed my locks, I said. A beat of silence. Oh, we were worried about security. You know, the neighborhood. You signed me into a facility without my consent. Jason said it was temporary. I want my house keys. She exhaled. Let's give it a week, okay? Focus on getting better. We'll take care of everything at home. I could hear a television in the background, sports, the comfortable sound of someone lounging in a living room that used to be mine. Put my son on the phone. He's tied up at the moment. She lowered her voice, sincerity varnished on. We love you. We're doing what's best. The line went dead. I set the receiver down carefully, so I wouldn't throw it. At lunch, an orderly wheeled a cart into the hall. A resident I hadn't noticed before, the kind of thin that looks like paper, leaned out of her doorway and said, You're new. I nodded. Margaret. Ruth, she said, don't drink the lemonade. Why? It tastes like forgetting. I smiled despite myself. Thank you for the warning. That afternoon, Tara brought a stack of activity calendars I didn't want, and a cup of tea I did. You okay? She asked. I looked at the steam curling up from the paper cup, then at the doorway, where the hall's blue carpet met my room's brown. My son thinks I'm done, I said. He thinks he can put me in a drawer and label it taken care of. Tara tilted her head. And are you? I met her eyes. Not even close. When she left, I reached for the tea and felt something settle inside me. Not peace, not yet. Something colder. A hinge turning. A door I had known I could still open. Jason had given me a label. Burden. I whispered it once into the quiet, then folded it in half, then again, until it was small enough to slide into my pocket like a seed. I would plant it, and when it grew, he would carry it every time he opened my front door. Jason was my only child, and after his father died, he became my whole world. I was 29 when the doctor said the word cancer, and I watched the light go out of my husband's eyes before the illness even took him. The treatments drained everything we had. By the time I buried him, I had nothing left but a toddler on my hip and a stack of bills taller than my courage. But I had no choice. I scrubbed floors until my knees cracked. I cleaned houses where people looked through me like I was part of the furniture. I took night shifts at a diner, the kind where the coffee never stopped burning, and neither did the loneliness. I skipped meals so Jason could have full plates. I patched his shoes with tape until I could afford new ones. When he wanted to play baseball, I picked up an extra shift so I could buy him a glove. When he outgrew his coat, I wore a sweater in the dead of winter so he could have warmth. I pawned my wedding ring the year he graduated high school just so I could buy him the suit he wore across the stage. He never knew. He never asked where the ring had gone. Every birthday, every scraped knee, every late-night fever. I was there. My hands bled, my back ached, but I never complained because I thought love would come back around, that when I was old and weak, Jason would remember the nights I stayed up sewing costumes for school plays, the mornings I went without breakfast so he could have seconds, the years I lived without rest so he could grow up without fear. When he got into college, I thought my sacrifice was worth it. I cried in the kitchen when the acceptance letter came. I made him a chocolate cake, lopsided but proud. He barely glanced at me as he snapped a picture for his friends. When he married Danielle, I welcomed her with open arms. I told myself she was family now, that she'd love him enough for both of us. I gave them the master bedroom when they came to stay, cooked meals for them, slipped Danielle the recipe to Jason's favorite stew. I even handed over the keys to my car when they said theirs was in the shop. I thought that was what mothers did, kept giving even when there was nothing left to give. But looking back, I see the cracks now. The way Jason always sighed when I asked him to help with heavy groceries. The way Danielle would exchange glances with him when I told a story I'd already told before, as if my memory was already fading. The way he'd say, "Mom, you worry too much," when I tried to ask about his work, his bills, his life. I brushed it off, told myself he was busy, that young people didn't mean to be cruel, but love makes you blind to shadows until the lights go out completely. And when I fainted in the kitchen that Tuesday morning, I thought it was nothing, just low blood sugar. I woke up to Jason's face hovering above mine, all concern and furrowed brows. "Mama, we just want what's best for you," he said. Danielle stood behind him, her hand on his shoulder, nodding like she'd rehearsed it. They brought over soup, asked me questions about old documents, about my will, about how hard it must be to keep up the house at my age. I thought it was kindness, but it was calculation. Behind my back, they'd already spoken to a lawyer. They were already whispering to neighbors that I was slipping mentally, already laying the foundation for the lie that I was too weak, too slow, too burdensome to manage on my own. And the cruelest part, I didn't see it, not until it was too late. The first few days in that place were a blur of routines that weren't mine. Wake up at 6, pills at 7, breakfast at 8, eggs boiled into rubber, toast that crumbled to dust, bingo on Wednesdays, choir on Fridays, lives scheduled like bus routes, every stop the same until the end of the line. I sat in the day room with strangers who stared past me like the world had already forgotten their names. The television blared game shows, the nurses hurried from room to room, and I felt myself disappearing. But I wasn't confused. I wasn't fading. I was furious. One morning, I asked the front desk for my personal file. The woman hesitated, but I insisted. "It's my name on the papers. I have a right to see what my son signed." When she finally handed it over, I opened the folder with hands steadier than I expected. And there it was, Jason's handwriting, his signature, his neat check marks and boxes that declared me incompetent, unsafe, unfit to live on my own. Reason for admission: increasing confusion, possible dementia. Notes: reports of wandering, forgetting bills, leaving stove on. Long-term placement recommended. A lie, every word of it. I sat in that plastic chair, staring at the ink, and felt heat rise through me like fire under skin. My own son, the boy I had fed, clothed, carried through storms of debt and loneliness, had written me off like an old appliance too costly to repair. Later that afternoon, I overheard Danielle in the hallway. She was on the phone, her voice carrying just enough to reach me through the cracked door. Yes, the locks are already changed. We moved our things in last weekend. No, she doesn't know. The lawyer says the papers will hold. She can't contest. Jason wants to renovate the kitchen first thing. Her laugh, sharp, metallic, clanged in my ears. My kitchen, my curtains, my house. They had moved into it, like I was already dead. I sat on the edge of the bed, fists clenched, shaking not from weakness, but from rage. That night, Ruth, the paper-thin woman from across the hall, leaned on her walker and whispered, "First week's the hardest. After that, you stop fighting." I shook my head. No, I'll never stop fighting. Her cloudy eyes studied me. Then you'll survive. And in that moment, something shifted. I saw the betrayal not as an ending, but as a challenge. Jason thought I was a burden. He had no idea. I would show him what a real burden looked like, one he'd never escape. I started paying attention, watching, listening. The staff were overworked, but kind. Tara, the young nurse, had ambition in her eyes. The administrator, Ms. Porter, followed rules, but left gaps wide enough for someone clever to slip through. The residents, oh, they knew things. Family gossip spilled over visiting hours. Bits of overheard phone calls, rumors about inheritances, grudges whispered when the lights dimmed. And me, I still had my mind, my wit, my years of balancing books, of stretching pennies into meals, of surviving on grit. When the world said I couldn't, I wasn't done. Every betrayal carries its own lesson. And the lesson I learned sitting on that stiff mattress, listening to Danielle laugh about my kitchen, was simple. If my son wanted to treat me like I was already gone, then I'd build a future where he'd wish I had been. A future where he'd regret every tick of the pen that signed me away. The day I stopped shaking was the day I started planning. Jason thought I would sit quietly in this place, waiting for visits that would never come, my mind softening until I forgot who I was. But he underestimated me. He always had. I still had my memory. I still had my fight. And most importantly, I still had friends in places he didn't know. I began with the staff. People always reveal more than they realize if you listen carefully. Tara, the nurse with kind eyes, had the habit of humming when she worked, a song I recognized, her grandmother's hymn, the same one I used to sing in church. That was my opening. "Your grandma taught you that one, didn't she?" I asked one evening. She looked startled, then smiled. "How did you know?" "I'm old, not deaf." I winked. My husband used to sing it too. That small connection turned into longer talks. I learned Tara was studying for her nursing degree, drowning in tuition, working double shifts. She wanted out of this understaffed place as much as I did. "You're sharp," she told me once. "Not like the notes say. You shouldn't be here." "Then help me prove it," I said. Next, I turned to Ms. Porter, the administrator. She was bound by rules, yes, but she also cared about reputation. Lawsuits scared her more than paperwork. So I started keeping records, daily notes of my meals, my routines, the crossword puzzles I completed, the books I read. I asked Tara to sign off each evening that I was alert and oriented. When Miss Porter came for her rounds, I handed her the stack. "Your son may have signed these forms," I told her, my voice steady. "But if you keep me here against my will, you're complicit in fraud. And I'll find a lawyer who won't hesitate to make that public." Her expression flickered. irritation, then unease. "I'll review this," she said, slipping the notes into her folder. Exactly what I wanted. I hadn't spoken to my old friend Harold Bennett in years, not since his law office helped me refinance the house after my husband died. But I remembered his kindness, the way he said, "Margaret, you've got more grit than half my clients combined." I asked Tara to slip me her phone one evening. Hands trembling, I dialed his number. He answered on the third ring. "Harold, it's Margaret Hale." There was a pause, then warmth. "Margaret? My God, it's been years. How are you?" I told him everything. The fainting spell, Jason's sudden concern, the signatures, the nursing home, the locks changed. By the time I finished, Harold's voice was steel. "That's elder fraud, plain and simple. You still have your faculties, Margaret, and I'll make sure the court sees it." We began quietly drafting a plan. He advised me on what records to keep, what documents to request, how to challenge the admission papers. Most importantly, he helped me begin the process of transferring the deed of the house into a living trust, one Jason couldn't touch. I couldn't let Jason suspect. When he and Danielle finally came to visit, smug, smiling, dressed like they were heading to brunch, I played my part. "How are you feeling, Mom?" Jason asked, voice dripping with false warmth. "Oh, better," I said sweetly. "Rest is doing me good." Danielle smirked. "See, we told you this was best." I nodded, hiding my fury under practiced calm. "You always know what's best for me." They left reassured, never realizing that while they were redecorating my living room, I was quietly dismantling their entire scheme. Revenge, I realized, wasn't about yelling or throwing things. It was about weight, making them carry the burden they tried to drop on me. I made sure the utilities and taxes on the house were rerouted to Jason's name. If he wanted to claim I was incompetent, then let him pay for the upkeep he thought I couldn't manage. I instructed Harold to begin legal filings that would freeze any attempt to sell the property. Danielle's renovation dreams would crumble before they began. And as the trust documents moved forward, I added a clause. When I passed, the house wouldn't go to Jason. It would go to charity, a women's shelter downtown, the kind that had helped me once when I was young and desperate. Jason thought he'd inherit a house. Instead, he'd inherit nothing but bills and a reputation stained by whispers of what he'd done to his own mother. Each night, as I lay in that narrow bed, I pictured Jason unlocking my front door, his arrogance filling the hallway, Danielle laughing in the kitchen I had painted with my own hands. And then I pictured the day they'd find the locks changed, the deed gone, their future collapsing in on itself. That image kept me warm under the thin blanket. Jason had called me a burden, but soon he would learn what a real burden felt like, and it would be one he could never set down. Weeks passed, and the pieces of my plan clicked into place as quietly as gears in a clock. Jason and Danielle thought they had won. They had moved into my home, posted pictures of their new chapter on social media, and told neighbors I was settled comfortably in a facility. But I knew better. And soon, everyone else would too. It started with a phone call. Harold, my lawyer, arranged for Jason and Danielle to visit the nursing home. "We need signatures," he told them, "to finalize some paperwork for your mother's care." They arrived dressed like royalty, Danielle in a designer dress, Jason in his press shirt, both grinning as though they were about to inherit a kingdom. They walked into the small meeting room, expecting to find me pliant, weary, ready to sign away whatever they wanted. Instead, they found me waiting with Harold, a neat stack of documents in front of us. Jason frowned. "What's all this?" Harold folded his hands. "This is a correction, Mr. Hale. Your mother has contested her admission and filed for immediate release. She is of sound mind, as evidenced by medical evaluations, And as of today, she is reinstating full control over her affairs. Danielle scoffed. You can't just. Yes, we can. Harold cut her off smoothly. You signed documents under false pretenses. That's fraud. If we chose to pursue this in court, you could face charges. Jason's face turned pale. Charges? She's my mother. I was just trying to steal her house. I interrupted, my voice sharp enough to slice the room in half. To lock me away like I was already dead. Don't you dare dress betrayal up as kindness. The silence that followed was suffocating. Danielle's smirk faltered. Jason opened his mouth, then shut it again. Harold slid the papers across the table. You're free to read them, but they're already filed. Effective immediately, Mrs. Hale controls her property, her finances, and her future. And one more thing, the deed to the house has been placed into a living trust. Neither of you will inherit it. Danielle gasped. What? Jason's fists clenched. Mom, you can't do this to me. That house is mine, I said firmly. Always was. Always will be. When I left the nursing home a week later, Tara hugged me at the door. You're stronger than anyone I've ever met, she whispered. I pressed a small envelope into her hand. A check Harold had helped me arrange. For your tuition, I said, don't waste your kindness here forever. The sunlight outside felt like freedom. Jason didn't come to pick me up. Danielle didn't call. They were too busy panicking, too busy trying to figure out how to explain to neighbors why they no longer had control of their house. When I returned to my street, the sight made me stop and laugh, bitter but free. They had repainted the front door bright blue, their mark of ownership, but taped to it now was Harold's notice. Access revoked. Locks changed. Trespassing will be prosecuted. The neighbors were watching, too. Word spread fast. Whispers about how Jason had thrown his own mother into a home, how Danielle had bragged about renovations, how they'd stolen what wasn't theirs. Now everyone knew the truth. Jason tried to fight, of course. He called me, voice trembling with anger. You embarrassed me. You made me look like a fool. No, I said calmly. You did that all by yourself. And then I hung up. The following months were quiet, peaceful. I replanted the garden, scrubbed Danielle's perfume out of the curtains, cooked in my kitchen, without fear of being erased. Jason and Danielle struggled. Bills piled up. After all, I had shifted the utilities and taxes into Jason's name before everything flipped. They thought they were clever. Instead, they were left paying for a house they no longer controlled. Every envelope in their mailbox was a reminder of the burden they had tried to throw on me. Neighbors stopped inviting them to barbecues. Church friends whispered behind their backs. Jason's reputation at work faltered. After all, how could a man trusted with accounts not even manage his own family with honesty? He called once more, his voice breaking. Mama, I'm sorry. We thought it would be easier. I closed my eyes, remembering every sleepless night I'd spent earning what he so casually tried to steal. Every meal skipped so he could eat. Every sacrifice made so he could have a future. You thought wrong, I said quietly, and I ended the call. People ask what revenge feels like. They expect fire, shouting, the satisfaction of destruction. But the sweetest revenge isn't fire. It's weight. It's making the people who called you a burden carry their own choices day after day until it grinds them down the way they tried to grind you. Jason thought he could lock me away and inherit my life. Instead, I walked back into my home stronger than before, and he walked away with nothing but shame. At night, when I sit by the window with a cup of tea, I whisper the words that carried me through those long weeks. You said I was a burden. Now you carry yours. And I smile because I know he will. Every time he looks at a bill he can't pay, every time a neighbor turns away, every time he wonders how he lost everything without even realizing it was slipping from his hands. I wasn't finished. I wasn't confused. And I will never again be underestimated.